Tomás, good afternoon. It's good to have you on the show again.
Good to see you again, man. Thank you for having me.
We chatted last in January, and congrats on the $30 million round in the summer. Tell us what's changed at the company since we last spoke.
Yeah, a lot. And thank you for that. I appreciate it. Right after we close that round, we also then announced another strategic investment from Citi. So we've sort of had this just fantastic fortune of having great investors believe in what we're doing, company growth, really demonstrating the value that we seek to go and provide, as well as really solving the problem that we're trying to do. And so what we're seeing fundamentally is that the adoption in the market of our solution has really taken off, and it's taken off across the markets that we really have focused on. And I think, Carlos, one of the things we talked about that was sort of fundamental to how Spinwheel sees this is we see this as an ecosystem. We don't see this as just sort of you got lenders, and lenders are distinct from marketplaces or affiliates, and those are distinct from PFMs. We see this as an ecosystem. We see this as a life cycle for the consumer. And that perspective was really validated in the way that our products are being adopted by these customers, and also by the funding, with the last rounds that we took in. And to maybe put a finer point on that, this ecosystem is underpinned by something we call the Spinwheel Network Token and the Spinwheel Network. It's because it creates that connective tissue for this financial ecosystem that helps the consumer as they go through this journey, and helps each of these partners that engage on that consumer journey really thrive. And we've been able to demonstrate that not just in terms of a product working, but actually uptake in the market and the way that it's actually working and the results that we're seeing across our partners. So I think that's the biggest thing. Other than that, we raise money to grow the team, and we've done that. We've grown substantially, and just everything is accelerating at the company, which is good. At the same time, it also creates its own focus and challenges that you got to manage as you're scaling a company.
So I heard through my network that you were at a conference in November in Miami.
Yes.
And that you demoed the network token, and I unfortunately missed it. I'm bummed about that. Yeah. But I'd love to spend a good chunk of our time today on the network token. So maybe let's zoom up for a second. What problem does the token solve?
Yeah. So if you think about the journey across this financial ecosystem that I was talking about, let's take you through a very common example, right? So consumer goes to a landing page where they are trying to get smarter about what is the right financial product for them. It might be shopping for a personal loan. It might be shopping for a credit card. It might be a HELOC. And especially in today's environment, the areas that you see the most growth is really around these loans that help people help people deal with their unsecured debt. So consolidating credit card debt, restructuring some of the credit card debt. And then you kind of have that, and you also have the other sort of clear distinction where it's like maybe people who are really, really in distress, who are really looking to kind of get some additional cash infused into their world. So in both those situations, the consumer has to go on this journey where they have to learn about what products are available for them. And that typically starts at some landing page or marketplace. So let's give an example, client of ours like NerdWallet. So, the consumer's going to go to NerdWallet, and they're going to go through this experience where they learn about the products. Then eventually they get mapped to, let's say, a series of potential providers, typically lenders. Typically, what is happening in this journey before Spinwheel, this consumer has to jump across multiple steps. They've got to start at the marketplace, and they go to the lender, then they got to start that journey to the lender again. And then after they get the loan from the lender, then they're typically ending up at some solution. It might be a spreadsheet at home. It might be a PFM like Monarch Money. But they typically have to figure out how they're going to manage these funds. They're going to figure out how they're going to apply them. So if you look at that journey today without Spinwheel, each of those are distinct experiences that the consumer has to go through. And while there has been some work to try and make it seem connected, it actually isn't. Behind the scenes, it's completely disconnected. You have the user starting one place, then they have to go to the lender, and they typically have to start over again. And you get asked a lot of the same questions. You have to provide a lot of the same PII again. Then you have to go through the underwriting process. Then you get the money. And then you have to say, well, where am I going to manage money? And then it's completely up to the consumer on how they go do that. we see this world being completely different. The fundamental problem we see in all that is that there's too much friction, there's too much drop off, and there's nothing that really helps the consumer as they go through that journey or helps the clients engage with the consumers as they go through that. So enter Spinwheel Network Token and Spinwheel Network. What we see is take that entire journey and take it from a consumer's perspective and say, the consumer ultimately is going through this journey, and why should it be something that they're doing this in this sort of very stovepipe manner? And we say, why can't we create it in a way that it's consistent, it's easy, and you join these distinct experiences to one that makes it easier for the consumer to go through that. So I took that example and I contrast it to how it looks now. Is that consumer can start at a marketplace, they can put in the information they need to shop for their loans, and then when they select that lender, they don't start at the beginning of their funnel. They don't start at step 2 or 3 of the funnel. They can now start at almost the very, very end of the funnel where they're being said, hey, what are the credit cards you want to consolidate? And those credit cards can already be there ready for the consumer to select which ones they want to consolidate and pay off, right? Small sample. But if you think about how that is done today, the consumer has to go through 5 or 6 steps. And then maybe they're asked, okay, Carlos, which of the cards do you want to consolidate? Well, with this network effect, you can take that consumer from the very first step, and once they're now paired with that lender, they can jump right into as some of our lenders call it, the liability pre-fill step. And the reason is because we have all of that. That's already there. Once that consumer is authenticated and connected, we can have that. And then let's say when that consumer maybe wants to go to their favorite PFM and be able to manage all in one spot, they don't have to go log in again and reconnect. And it's as simple as being able to say, hey, this user can now be passed along with our technology and what we call our network token, and they can continue their experience and manage it. And by the way, that consumer is probably going to be back again, either in a year or a couple of years for the next financial product. And you can still be using this connective tissue to make that experience seamless. So that's fundamentally, when you think about that problem, if I had to put a very simple point on it, we're removing the friction and we're removing these walls that have been built up between this consumer experience because they have to go across multiple companies. And we're streamlining that, which leads to better results for our clients, better results for lenders, and ultimately better outcomes for the consumer.
How I explain this to myself, and tell me if I'm on the right track here, if something's missing. You use the example of a publisher displaying personal loans or cards. My understanding of how this works is you ask for the date of birth and the phone number of the user. It hits an API. You text that user and say, hey, here's a code, make sure that's you. Once that happens, you pull down a bunch of information on that user, including credit attributes, but also some non-credit attributes. And then when the consumer says, yes, I want this product, you put, it's probably some kind of anonymous identifier in the URL. So it's XYZH4, whatever. It's a string of characters that doesn't mean anything to anybody. But once the lender receives it, they can decode that by calling your API again and saying, okay, well, who is this and what's all their credit data? Like, are those roughly the right mechanics, or is there something important that I missed?
So, and you nailed it. So if I had to just rephrase what you said slightly, I would say, 1, being able to remove the friction from being able to verify and authenticate a user is critical. So you're right. We do that with a phone number and date of birth. Those are only 2 pieces of data we need. We do use a one-time passcode to ensure that it's actually you, that someone's not just masquerading as you. So we then make sure it's you. As soon as we do that, what we're doing, think about it like this, Carlos, is we are generating the equivalent of like a passport, number for that user. We call it a network token. That number, as you said, this unique, global unique identifier, right? And this sharing is done at the direction of the consumer, because it's the consumer's data, it's their ID. But now you can avoid all the other stuff you just talked about. You don't have to type in all your PII again. You don't have to type in your social security number. You don't have to go type in which liabilities you have. You don't have to go find your card numbers. You don't have to go log into all your accounts. We've done all this because we've created this unique token that represents all those things. And as you just said, when that consumer is getting to the steps where they have to then, let's say, retrieve their liability details, retrieve their credit card numbers, maybe populate their SSN, they don't have to do that anymore. It's as simple as being able to say, I've decided I want to share this token. This token now has the information. I give you permission to then use this to be able to make my application a lot easier. So you're absolutely right. That's exactly how it works on the back end.
Cool.
I want to share it only with company A, or they can say, you know what, I want to share with company A, B, and C. And this is where that user experience drives that, right? We don't, there's nothing that fundamentally says when you decide to use Spinwheel, it gets shared with everybody. No. The consumer decides, I'm going to say I want to share with A, B, and C, and they get to say for which use cases. Now, the beauty of that sort of example we just talked about, let's say they're on a publisher, when that publisher says, hey, Carlos, or hey, Tomás, we found some great loans that might make sense for you at these pre-qualified offers. By saying you want to then go visit that lender, you are saying, okay, I actually now want to go and share my information with that lender. Now, that in of itself is not a new step. It's been done for years. So for example, this, sometimes they would be sharing your PII with a HTTP post in the back end, or sometimes they would just pass it over, through some URL parameters to try and get you to, have a warm landing at that other lender site. We don't have to require any PII, sensitive PII being passed in the clear or through APIs, because this token encapsulates all of that. So this is actually a safer way for the consumer to share the information and say, hey, you know what? No one else is going to see my PI. This is not going through some other logging tool or intermediary or anything else. This is a unique token that to an external party means nothing. But as soon as it ends up at that other lender, now that's with given that consent, now that lender can say, great, let's use that token to get what I need to help you get to the right step faster in our application funnel.
Cool. Let's talk about the data that comes with the token. Can you walk us? It sounds like there's some credit bureau data. Is it all three bureaus, and like what else gets passed along to the recipients?
Yeah. So if you think about that token as the representation or a tokenized instantiation of that user, it really is a combination of PII. So this would be things like first name, last name, address, social security number. It would also include liability data. So this can be liability data from any of the bureaus. It could be TU, it could be Equifax. It also includes potentially additional information, metadata around those liabilities. It could be things like real-time balances on those liabilities. It could be things like card name and art for specific credit cards. It could be due dates. The way to think about it is any of the data that the consumer is saying that they want to retrieve for their liability information can now be provided as part of this token, right? And when that token now gets used or passed across these experiences, the consumer can say, "Yep, I wanna be able to share all of my credit cards because I want to now pay these off," right? And so that consumer gets to decide what data they want to share when. But fundamentally, that token is the passport to be able to access all of that data that the consumer is saying, "I want you to retrieve for me to support this use case."
And is it just credit bureau data as the sources, or are there other?
No, credit bureau is one. And we have multiple sources. So it's credit bureau data, it's public records data, it's bill payment data, it is payment network data, it is specific creditor and lender loan servicing data. It can be, let's say we're talking about your house, can be property related data. It's really the way to, if you abstract this, the way we see this is, if the consumer ever has to go and log into something else or go download statements as part of this journey, that's an opportunity for us to make it that much easier for the consumer, so they don't have to do that anymore. So the way this should work in the future, is any of those things that might be needed as part of this journey, we should be able to retrieve for the consumer, make it easier for them to then engage with this lender or the parties along this journey.
Okay. My understanding is Spinwheel is certified as a credit reporting agency. Is that
that's correct? Right? It's a journey we went through. Yeah.
So what? How does that connect with the service that you provide? And I guess said differently, if you were not a credit reporting agency, would you be able to deliver the network token as you've described it so far?
Yes. Yes. We absolutely. I think the key distinction here is it's for which purposes. So under the FCRA, there are permissible purposes that you can use data for. The consumer's data that we are then helping the consumer share, technically, there's some legalese here, but fundamentally, we don't feel comfortable saying that could be used for the purposes of determining creditworthiness under the FCRA, right? So there's the other permissible purpose can be used for is for the purposes of them understanding their own data. So think about a consumer logging in and saying, hey, I want to manage my own my own information. I want to stay on top of my credit score. I want to see what credit cards I have. Like that's all stuff that can be done without being a CRA. Where being a CRA helps is like now if we want to do things like resell a bureau report for the purposes of determining credit or worthiness, we can actually do that, right? If there's additional attributes that we want to then use for the purposes of underwriting or helping determine credit worthiness, we can now do that. So it opens up a whole new series of use cases that we can power. So it's not like a binary, you can't or can't use a network token of CRA. It's like you can do X without being a CRA, or you can do X plus Y with being a CRA. And so we just want to make sure that we're being able to support all the use cases that are out there.
Got it. So building on that, if I was a publisher and you visited my page and you said, hey, I want to see if I qualify for the Chase Freedom card, and you give me your consent, your date of birth, and your phone number, and I found that in that instant you were not qualified for the Chase Freedom card. Let's just say that was the outcome, but I showed you some other stuff and you didn't convert. As a publisher, I think if I'm following this correctly, I could check in 30 days. I could be like, Tomás wanted Chase Freedom. We weren't able to give it to him a month ago. But I'm curious if he qualifies today. I re-ping your credit with the consent that you've provided, and I find that you do qualify today. Do I now have permission as the publisher to send you an email and say, hey, Tomás, the product that you wanted is now available to you? Like, are you seeing that use case in practice?
Absolutely. That is a perfect use case. I want to be really clear, though. There's two things that work there. So the first is everything said around the service that we provide is accurate. As long as the consumer has provided the consent to this publisher to say, hey, please stay on top of this for me. Always be looking out for my best interest to see if there's, new cards that I can get. Yes, absolutely. You said. Now, whether or not they can be repinged, that now falls under the terms and conditions and privacy policy that the publisher has directly with the consumer, right? So if you think about the way we work, we have a direct relation to the consumer. The consumer is saying, Spin, I want you to be able to help me manage my data. And then the publisher has a direct relationship with the consumer as well. Now that whole repinging and all that, as long as that is taken under control or that's being handled by the privacy policy and terms and conditions by the publisher, absolutely. But as you just said, yes, that happens today. There are a lot of sites out there today where publishers, especially now given the changes with AI and let's say the challenges like the blue link funnels, you have to, we're seeing more and more publishers creating these use cases where they want to stay more engaged with the consumer, where it is more of a logged in experience, right? And in that model, this is where our network token, our services shine, because it actually makes it so simple to be able to do what you just said and to keep these publishers and keep these users engaged beyond just that first interaction.
Got it. In that same example I just gave, if I was a lender, and let's say, same example, Chase Freedom card, publisher says yes, you do qualify. As we know, there's drift between the pre-qual decision and the back end. So let's say the user lands on Chase, and Chase ends up declining for whatever reason. It sounds to me like you're saying, so long as Chase has the right privacy policy and consent from the consumer, Chase in 30 days could also reping, rerun credit, and then go back and say, hey, you know what? A month ago, you didn't qualify. Today, you do.
That's right. 100%. Yep. And again, it's all predicated on the fact that as long as the consumer has been aware and has given consent to Chase to engage them that way and use the data in that way, 100%. And that is a great use case that we support today because, look, the consumer may either have not been ready to make the decision, they got busy, they fell out of the funnel, or they got declined, whatever it may be. But being able to re-engage with the consumer 10 days later, 30 days later, 6 days later, whatever it is a great use case for what we're able to provide.
Okay. So can we, one thing I know is going to come up just with lenders that I work with, because we talk about stuff like this all the time, is how is the ecosystem you're building similar or different to, say, Plaid? Because you have like open banking networks like Plaid where it's still consumer permissioned. The difference, I think, right out of the gate is they're asking for username and password for a specific account. It doesn't sound like you guys are requiring that because you're keying off of phone number and date of birth. Can you help me understand key differences and similarities between what Plaid's building and what you're building?
Yeah, it fundamentally starts at, I would say almost on the architectural level. So the best way I can describe this, Carlos, is with Spinwheel, we architected the entire solution based on the concept of an end user. So when I talk about the fact that there is like a user ID, a user token that gets generated with every connection, that is the underlying entity that drives the entire system. Now, why that matters is if you compare that with something, let's say like a Plaid or your traditional open banking models, the fundamental entity that is based on is the account. You know, my account with Bank of America or my account with Wells Fargo, right? Why that matters is that for us, the user can have X number of accounts. And each one of those accounts can have X number of attributes. And it can have X number of or Y number of actions that might be taken on that. And that can change over time. And it also allows our clients to more naturally fit into their use cases, because almost every use case that we see, our clients are dealing with an end user and are trying to make sure that everything's tied to that end user as they're going through their flow. When you think about the distinction between this and, let's say, an open banking, because they're based on account level, they have this concept of saying, okay, well, I don't know if this is Carlos or not, but I'm going to just say this is account A. Okay, now this is account B, and this is account C. And it forces the user to go through this, and these use cases, the user has to identify their accounts, and then they're the ones who have to sort of aggregate it into their view as to this is my information and tie it back to who they are. You also said something else that's also a fundamental difference, is that because we're doing it at the user level, we are authenticating and verifying the user at that level, not with username and passwords that are used to connect accounts, right? So that's a huge, what we also saw was like, that was just a huge source of friction. It's maybe not as acute when you're dealing with one or two bank accounts that you're connecting. It's incredibly acute when you're dealing with 12 liabilities that you're trying to connect. No one remembers 12 passwords. No one's going to take the time to do that. And it's also not the safest way to do it. So I say that some of those are like the most fundamental architectural distinctions. And then to your point is, because we built this around a user level, it naturally flows into this network concept, because we then understand that Carlos is going through this experience. We understand that this user is going through this experience. And because the accounts and the liabilities are connected at that user object can now facilitate across these journeys. So I think that's the second key distinction. And then the third is bank account aggregation is extremely important, especially in these sort of cash flow underwriting models. So I think it's a hugely important aspect of lending and fintech today. But the liability information is extremely important. And when you think about these traditional bank account, open banking aggregators, it's been focused on bank accounts. And if any of them have sort of liability products, there's sort of been afterthoughts that have just been glommed on because, well, hey, when I logged into Chase and I was screen scraping Chase, oh, guess what? I found maybe a credit card in there too. So maybe I can pull that in. That's sort of like that just the point I'm trying to make here is they weren't purpose built for liabilities. We are purpose built for liabilities. We are purpose built for these use cases that I'm talking about. And it shows up both in terms of the way the consumer experience is built, the architecture, and the underlying data.
Got it. Okay. Where are we with network adoption? So it seems to me like the value of what you've built increases as more publishers and more lenders adopt. So like you have the classic two-sided, like
you got it.
Like you have to bring both sides along. Like where are we with that? December 2025.
It's never as far as long as I'd like, right? It's one of those things where it's like, man, I would love to have, this is something that everybody should be using immediately and everybody should be getting the value out of it. And the whole vision here is there is a world where, an end consumer never has to go through this disjointed, broken experience that's out there today. We're not there yet. Obviously, we wouldn't be having this conversation if we had that much penetration. That said, it's actually come along very, very well. So, we've got dozens of clients who are now using this across these experiences. We've got hundreds of thousands of consumers and network tokens that are being used across these experiences on a monthly basis. So the flywheel is spinning, right? I think the thing that we have to do is we have to say, okay, great. How do we continue to just make it easier for the nodes of the network to join and participate? From a technology standpoint, it's actually very, very simple. You're passing a unique ID. I think the challenge we have is how do we make sure that people understand that A, this exists, and B, that the benefits are real. Like a lot of the conversations, like great conversation I had, this is just this week. I was talking to one of clients and they were like, specifically on this flow. And they're like, yeah, but I've got the challenge I might have with this is that when we pass PII, it creates a whole sort of extra level of work. And we have to work with you guys on what it means to like pass PI. And I said, hold on for a second. You're not passing any PII.
Yeah.
And he was like, wait, what? And I said, no, there's no PII passed at all. And then he's like, oh, wait a minute. Like this solves a bunch of my problems. And so he was like, then he started really, and he was like, okay, we got to start talking about this now. Right. So that's the level. It's almost these things is like with any new service or product, you've got just this, this ground you got to cover to make sure people know about it, to make sure that they understand the value they're going to get and how easy it is to implement it. But very, very encouraged with where it's at today. And the partners who are using are seeing a ton of value.
That's awesome. So you keyed in right where I wanted to go next, which is barriers you're seeing to adoption. And to me, if I had to give it some buckets to it, it's a barrier could be I just flat out don't understand how it works. It's kind of like what you just explained, right? It could be I understand how it works, but I don't know how to put a number to the value.
Yeah.
So there could be like a business case type of gap. Or third could be some kind of implementation type of thing, right? My compliance department says no, or my tech says they can't do it, or whatever, right? Some kind of implementation oriented barrier. Like when you talk to potential customers, where are you seeing heat as far as barriers to adoption? Which are the three buckets, or is there something else?
No. I think you're right. We're not seeing any barriers or inertia or friction related to the implementation barriers. That's really, really straightforward and by design built. So it's so simple. It's as simple as either having an additional attribute appended to a URL string, right? Or an additional field you just take on for a post, an HTTP post when you're getting a lead sent over. Like that's how simple it is. So there's no real lift here, right? So where do we see the barriers coming in? So one, there's just a natural, I would say, speed and velocity we have to just sign up clients to using Spinwheel, right? Like, we now have a real go-to-market organization and it's doing fantastic, but like the ability for the network to grow and for people to participate is a function of how fast we can actually get clients to sign up and recognize Spinwheel and say, okay, great, like let's use it. The benefit though is that as you get more of these partners on, there's a flywheel effect that happens that says like, partner A goes, you know what, I want all the rest of my partners using this. And so they then say, hey, go get on this. And then, a partner B goes, well, I'm using this now. Like, great, I want all my other publishers to start using this. So you start seeing this, happen. So I think that will naturally assist with that. So then let's talk about the second barrier is, it is not an implementation barrier. It's more of a, hey, Spinwheel, can you go get me, all of my publishers on this, right? And we go, well, sure, let's go talk about what that means, right? And so that it turns into a business development effort, right? So we've got it, and someone says, hey, okay, here's my top 5 publishers. Go work on getting me these top 5 publishers because we want to use this. Perfect example happens today where we've got one that says, hey, I'm using this with 2 of my publishers today, and this is amazing. The results I see are like blowing everything out of the water. The return on spend, the lift in the loan portfolio is through the roof for the users who come in with your network token. I've got 5 other large publishers that I want on this. Let's go get them on. We then got to go to those 5 other publishers and we say, okay, great, and we start those conversations. And those conversations start, and then what happens is those publishers say, well, that's good, but you've got 2 of my partners on. I've got an additional 30. How do we get these additional 30 on? So it's just this, how do we climb the ladder enough where it's not even the technical person, let's say the P&L owner goes, you know what, there's enough density here for me to say that I could turn this on for like everybody, right? And I think that's the biggest barrier that we have here is how do we build that density fast enough? And it's starting, it's just, I always think about how can I accelerate that? How to make that go faster? So next time I go and talk to, let's say, a lender, I can say, you know what, guess what? All of your publishers are already live, right? There's no additional thing I've got to do. It's like, hey, get all your publishers already live. You can use this for your entire channel.
I'm sitting here smiling because I remember back to like my Credit Karma days. I remember working on initiatives that had that similar dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Where you'd hear from a lender, yeah, that's great, but and then there's some other require, and then it ends up being a little bit circular. So yeah, I can empathize with that. So I guess that to me feels totally logical in a world where onboarding from the publisher and the lender side is a heavy lift. Let's say it took a year to implement this. But based on what you're hearing, I'm not hearing it's a huge implementation on both. So I guess I am a little bit surprised to hear that objection, given that the implementation isn't tons and tons of work from like an engineering or executional perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. The implementation to consume to pass the token and consume the token is nothing. It's literally adding a field. Where the implementation does come in is now if let's say that lender says, hey, I want to then augment my user experience so that I can show you all the credit cards that you need to consolidate part of this loan. And I'm going to go, that's where they've got to spend some time on their UI if they want to then really get all the benefits out of that. So that's where you see on that. But that said, I always tell people, you don't have to start there.
That could be phase 2, right?
Yeah, that can be phase 2. You can start with just getting all this and having it on the back end, because guess what? And I had this conversation this week. So many of these processes that are happening today are still manual and error prone. And if nothing else, you're going to be able to get accurate information. You're going to remove those manual errors, and you're going to see immediate lift from that. You don't have to do the full UI experience. That can be a phase 2. And by the way, you're probably going to be iterating on that for a really long time. I don't know anybody who never touches their funnel and isn't testing things and trying to iterate and improve. So yeah, that's always going to be something that's ongoing. So I think that's where when I think about like that objection, it's like hey, okay, I really want to do this now. I want to change my flow. Hey, okay, now to change that flow, I want to see at least 70% of my funnel that's coming from publishers to have this already turned on, right? And that's where that discussion. But I think this is where we can do a better job of saying, you don't have to wait. You don't have to be perfect is the enemy of good, right? There's things you can get out of the box right now that will have material value that you can get, and you don't have to wait for it being 100% perfect and having the Cadillac solution on the user experience.
You mentioned earlier some of your customers they're liking the results. They want to scale it across more publishers. Can you talk us through some highlights? Is it application rate lift? Like what are some of the keynote benefits that you?
It's absolutely the application rate lift, and it's also the close rate or the origination rate for those. So if you were to compare, let's say an end consumer who goes through, let's say the control group that does not doing anything with Spinwheel, and you compare it with like the cohort that is going through, what we're seeing is anywhere from like 20 to sometimes as high as like a 40% improvement, both in terms of the application completion rate. And then when you think about like the origination rate, and this really varies, but especially with lenders who are highly motivated to ensure that funds go to consolidate and pay down the liabilities that they're supposed to, when you have that element, the origination rate goes through the roof, because they were trying to do this in other ways. They're trying to send checks. They're trying to do it either with this, creditor search and back end payments. When you combine those two, you get the lift on the application completion. And then the origination, you get the lift on the origination rates. And then the last part that we see, which is great, and this is not something we invented, we just help accelerate it or help augment it, is what we've been hearing is, especially where lenders might be selling these loans on the back end, right? The ability for them to monetize this paper on the back end has a direct relationship with how that loan performs. And how those loans perform have a direct relationship to whether or not the consumer stays within the DTI range that they underwrote them at. Did they actually pay off the credit cards? Did they use it to, for the stated purpose? And so with our solution, because we can ensure that, it actually means that the portfolio performs better, not just because the lender's not defaulting or the user's not defaulting, but they're actually able to have that whole back-end mechanism, how you monetize this paper, really play out a lot better. I mean, great example here is if you take a HELOC, and you already had a HELOC, but you didn't close out of the HELOC, and now you got 2 HELOCs, like they can't sell that paper. It can't. No one's going to buy it, right? Because it's just so it's things like that you see: application lift, origination rates, and then the overall performance of how those loans perform.
No, that's awesome. That's super compelling. That's right in line with what I was expecting. I was expecting you to say 20% for the application rate lift because
20% I would say is the lowest we've seen.
Okay. I mean, I've seen a lot of these integrations, and I'm thinking like direct lender to publisher, direct bespoke integrations. And those, by the way, aren't scalable because it's just the one connection that's built. But 20% is a very typical outcome. If you're seeing that or above, like I think that's fantastic. Before we wrap today, Tomás, there was a piece I think one of your VC partners published over the summer. I think it was right around the time when you raised your round, and they were talking about how you all are building like a foundational layer for agentic commerce. Can you talk a little bit about that? That got me curious around, hey, like what does that mean? And if I'm a lender, how should I start to think about that?
So if you take sort of everything we just said, and if you believe that we're headed to a world where the traditional funnel is going to change because you're going to have these agents on the edge, either, our browsers, our typical, let's say, internet browsing experience changes to an agent that we engage with, right? Which you see some of that, people shifting their search to the AI agents or AI models. But if you believe like it's either going to be that, or we're all going to have like our own personalized agent on our device, turn to for all these things. Well, take a look at that funnel we just talked about for lending. That means that there's going to be some trusted agent that the end consumer is going to use and say, hey, go find me the best loan. Or not only that, it might be go look at my information, find me the best loan that's going to improve my position against some goal, and go execute it. Go do it for me. So what do you need in that scenario? One, you need to have a very, very low friction way for this agent to be able to interrogate your financial information, to decide what to do, right? Username and passwords don't scale in that model, right? What are you going to do? Persist like all using passwords with this agent? They change, they break, that doesn't work. So if you think about it this way, what we're doing with phone number and date of birth is a fundamental prerequisite to being able to make that happen. Second thing you need to have accurate information so that the agent can be making the informed decisions on your behalf. You can't have stale data. You can't have stale balances. You can't have blind spots where it makes the wrong information. Well, guess what? We have real-time balances. We have real-time information on all these liabilities. We can tell you when your next due date is. We can tell you if it's been paid down or not, what your minimum payment is, what your interest rates, like all that stuff matters. So now the agent has a frictionless way to engage. It's got all the accurate information. And then what's the next thing it needs to do? It needs to be able to actually take the action, right? Well, that's what we enable too. So, this agent would be able to say, okay, look, I'm going to go and execute this loan for you. I can see a world where it may not be signing for you, but it pops on the screen and says, Carlos, I've done all the work. Here's everything. Here's a full rundown of what it is. Click here to accept, or, do a DocuSign, sort of like just do this and you're done. Like you could see a world like that. But then you actually have to get the funds. Well, guess what? That's what our whole payment network and our action network is for, is you can actually enable the disbursement of those funds, and you can disperse it directly to the credit card. You can disperse it to the end consumer. And all of this is enabled with just that phone number, date of birth, and that token. And so when you think about where agentic commerce is going to go, you need these fundamental solutions. And the other thing to think about here is this is not data that's available on the web. So for example, I can't just go to the web and hoover up a bunch of training data on Carlos's finances. It doesn't exist, right? I have to actually have this specific relationship with Carlos, and I have to have this specific tool to make it happen. Well, that's where our fintech infrastructure play comes in, because we provide that piece for these smart agents to be personalized and engage with you and do these actions we just talked about. So if you believe that's where the world is going, you're going to need a fundamental solution and an infrastructure layer like the one we're providing. Some people may say it may never get there. That's too scary. Sure. But from our perspective, we're trying to make sure we build the infrastructure that can power what we're doing today and where everything's going to go in the future.
Is your role in that process, are you dialed in on always being an infrastructure player in that new world, or can you imagine actually building the agents and the apps that conduct these transactions on behalf of consumers?
I think it's the answer to that is we never see ourselves trying to be the end solution that a consumer is going to go to and use. We think that consumer choice is important. We think competition in the marketplace is really important. And so we're always going to be this ingredient brand, this ingredient solution that would power the best solutions in the market. And I think that's the best, because you're going to see it evolve. You're going to see competition. You're going to see new innovative ideas. And we don't want to, one, we don't have the team or the folks to go do that. And two, we think like having a vibrant ecosystem is the right thing to do. That said, we have, and we've launched and we built our own sort of reference agentic solutions that take everything I just said, that, we dog food our own stuff and built these solutions end to end that can do everything you just said. And we do that not because we're going to go launch that to consumers directly, because we think that this can help our clients in terms of either A, if they want to use some of these models and those agentic components, they can do that, or B, if they want to just sort of learn from what we've done that can help them sort of realize the potential. That's why we do that. So you'll see that being sort of an additional part of what we offer, but it'll be something that our clients can take and use, either embed or learn from or whatever else. So it's not going to be us being the end consumer solution, but it'll definitely be something where we've always been very, very consumer focused, and how do we help the consumer and bring that as fast as we can to our clients.
That's awesome. I'm excited about this whole agentic.
Yeah, it's cool. It's
commerce.
interesting to see where this goes for sure.
Yeah, no, and I do think I'm probably on the more optimistic side of the spectrum. I do think there's a day, and I actually don't think it's all that far off, where someone picks up their phone with the voice command and says, "Look, I just need the best rewards card. Find it for me and put it in my Google Wallet." Like,
you nailed it.
The DNA, like I know the fintech that could do that. Somebody could build that tomorrow.
Yes.
So for me to imagine that it's mainstream in 5 years isn't far fetched. So I actually do think we'll get there.
You're right. I think I can't say the name yet, but if everything goes well, you will within the next 4 months, you will see a very large consumer commerce wallet player do something very similar to what you just said, which is based on phone number, date of birth, help me populate my wallet with the stuff that I need to be able to help me in my checkout experience or my purchasing experience or whatever it is. And so you're right. We're going to see this stuff happening. And we feel this is sort of like a big thing of why we're trying to build the infrastructure for the future.
I mean, when that happens, distribution for consumer lenders is a completely different game.
Totally.
So
absolutely.
That I think that'll be fun to watch. So Tomás, thank you so much for taking the time today. This was super interesting to hear about the network token and your thoughts on where things are going with agentic commerce. And hope to have you again on the show sometime soon.
For sure, man. I'd love to. I appreciate it.